For now, let's turn gears to one of the highest profile remaining free agents, a guy who was linked to Cam Newton through March, April, May, and June because a significant player, a great player, a former number 1 overall pick in the draft, still can't find work. Jadeveon Clowney, available to be signed by anyone, still. And Jadeveon Clowney still not employed by an NFL team. We talked about him earlier this week, Charean, in the aftermath of the Yannick Ngakoue trade, because I have a very basic analysis that I'm still trying to resolve. If the Vikings pay $12 million for this year, plus give up a second-round pick, which some in league circles will say is worth $8 million when you're talking about the value of a trade, so that's $20 million right there, and then another pick on top of it, a fifth-rounder or up to a third-rounder in 2022, what is Clowney worth? And, you know, if Clowney's healthy, and again, this is the Cam Newton dilemma, if healthy, Jadeveon Clowney is one of the most disruptive forces in the NFL, and there are now reports that the Saints are pursuing Jadeveon Clowney, the Titans and the Seahawks still interested. You know, I think what this comes down to is how much money does Jadeveon Clowney really want? How much will he play for? What is his bottom line below which he says, screw it, I'm not going to sign a contract, I'm not going to go out there and play? And I think that's one of the reasons why he currently doesn't have a job with an NFL team. But as we get closer and closer to week 1, and he's looking at game checks he may lose, I think that it, you know, maybe it is inevitable that he's going to pick his best spot and go.
And he's got to do it now because he's got to pass COVID protocols. He's got to pass a physical, which we know he had the core muscle surgery in the offseason. So he's got to do it now. And I think this was always the intent after he didn't get the big contract he expected early in free agency, was to sit out training camp and sign before this first week. But it's got to be now. It's got to be this weekend if he's going to play in that first game and be disruptive, as you said, which he can against the pass. His greatest play ever, of course, was against the run. We remember it in college when he just crushed the Michigan running back, the Michigan great running back, and just killed him. But he's very, very good against the run as well as the power. He thinks of him as a pass rusher. Shoot, he had 3.5 sacks last season. So he's as good against the run as he is against the pass, and sometimes better against the run than he is against the pass. But how good would this make the Saints if they can get yet another pass rusher to go with Davenport, to go with Cam Jordan? This, to me, would make the Saints right up there. If they're already the favorites, I think, in the NFC. But if they get this guy, too, and playing Tom Brady, I really like their chances to get after the quarterback.
Let me be cynical and conspiratorial as it relates to what the Saints are doing here. It very well could be that as part of the bargaining with Alvin Kamara, the Saints running back, the argument will be, hey, Alvin, we got this money budgeted for you, and if you don't want it, we're going to spend it on Jadeveon Clowney. So you better say yes to this deal because the money's going away. I recall there was a time, I think it was the Steelers way back in 2012, they were trying to sign Mike Wallace. Remember him? It's amazing. He's just another example of one of these guys who was a great player, and then when he's gone, you have to stop and
forget about
I remember Mike Wallace, but Mike Wallace wanted a contract, and Mike Wallace rejected what the Steelers were offering him, so the Steelers said, fine, we'll give it to Antonio Brown instead. And even though we're talking about guys at two different positions, look, we've been around the game long enough to know that things like this happen, that coaches will use whatever they have at their disposal to get a guy to do what they want the guy to do. They want Alvin Kamara to sign, and it would not surprise me if the Saints are feigning interest in Jadeveon Clowney as part of a broader, hey, Alvin, if you don't sign, we are paying someone else with the money that otherwise would go to you. So the money that otherwise would go to you is going nowhere, and we're going to have to revisit this next year. So now let's set aside that possibility and assume that they are interested in Jadeveon Clowney, that they truly may make a run at him. I wonder on one level whether or not it shows they have concerns about Marcus Davenport, a guy they gave up a lot of trade capital to get in the first round a couple of years ago, or whether this is just let's fashion a rotation of guys who are just going to destroy opposing offensive lines. Either way, whoever gets Jadeveon Clowney, if it's a contender, it definitely bumps them up a level or two in how we're going to look at that team's prospects for 2020.
Yeah, no doubt about it. If the Titans end up with him, he's probably their best pass rusher, despite the fact that he had 3.5 sacks last season. I think he fits right in Tennessee and makes them a better defense for Mike Vrabel and what he can do with Jadeveon Clowney, because he's had him before in Houston. He was there when he was there, so he knows what he's getting in Jadeveon Clowney. And I think the Titans are a pretty good team, but he makes them even better. And I think it's the same with Seattle. I think he goes in there and makes them a better team with the pass rush. And despite the fact, again, that he only had 3.5 sacks, they feel like he was disruptive last year. They liked him. They wanted him back, but they wanted him back at their price. And they weren't going to pay any more than $15 million, and he may make less than $15 million now after turning down that deal.
And Charean, you keep mentioning that he only had 3.5 sacks, and while that's factually accurate, it shows that you are not sufficiently versed in the statistic that Chris Sims has created. We've submitted it to the Elias Sports Bureau in the hopes that they will make it part of the official menu of NFL statistics. It's the F up the play stat. It's the thing that doesn't manifest
and he has
itself.
that.
Yeah, in a tackle or a sack or an interception or a fumble. But what he does is he blows such a hole in what the offensive line is trying to do that it's just a jailbreak to the ball by other guys. And that's what Jadeveon Clowney does. Whatever the offensive line and the rest of the offense are planning to do, when he is firing on all cylinders, he can destroy that and F up the play, as Chris would say. And I think the best example of it was last year, the Monday night game between the Seahawks and the 49ers, how dominant he was. Now, didn't he have a touchdown in that game? He had an interception return for a touchdown.
Yeah, interception. Yeah.
But beyond that, it's what he does play in and play out to just completely disrupt everything and anything an offense is trying to do. The question with him is staying healthy. And also, you've got to manage him in practice, and that's what Pete Carroll, the Seahawks coach, was good at. This isn't a guy who needs a lot of practice. This is the guy who needs to be handled physically. And last year, remember, he was unsigned as a franchise tag player with the Texans. He wasn't part of the offseason program, wasn't part of training camp, signed his franchise tender at a slight reduction from 15.97 down to 15, was traded to the Seahawks this weekend, Labor Day weekend of last year, and still was an impactful player for most of the season until he developed the core muscle problem, the sports hernia, whatever term they use now. There's so many different terms for a hernia, but he had that issue and he played with it, and it first really popped up in the game against the 49ers on that Monday night, and he managed it the rest of the year. But, the Seahawks are still interested. Let's hear from Pete Carroll, the head coach of the team, acknowledging that even though he's still out there, he's still available, the team that employed him last year still has interest in employing him this year. Here's Pete Carroll from yesterday.
Are you guys still in contact with Jadeveon Clowney at all? Is the door still open on him at all?
Always competing. Always competing.
Always competing. I mean, that's thank you, Pete. But yeah, I mean, they haven't closed the door, and they shouldn't close the door. But here's the thing: how much will they pay? Remember, there's that weird little device in free agency where if the guy is still unsigned at the time the window for compensatory draft picks closes, you can do the tender to continue to hold his rights. And if he does go somewhere else, you still get compensatory draft pick consideration. That's what the Giants did with Marcus Golden. And the rule is you have to offer the guy 10% more than what his salary was last year. So the Seahawks could have squatted on Jadeveon Clowney for $16.5 million. They decided that's too much. And I've heard that for Clowney, he refuses to play at $15 million or less. Now, will that change this weekend? I don't know, but the posture all along has been he's not signing for 15 or less. The Browns reportedly wanted him for 15. So that's kind of where it has stood. But, Charean, everything changes now because we're getting to the point where whatever your salary is, every week that goes by when you're not on the team is a significant chunk of money that you've lost forever and is never coming back. So I'm starting to feel like whether it's the Seahawks, the Titans, the Saints, or someone else swoops in out of nowhere to sign Jadeveon Clowney, I'm starting to feel like we're getting close to the point where it's got to happen, and it's going to happen, and it just feels like the clouds are gathering for that Clowney signing to happen.
And we're talking about these three teams being interested. I mean, we heard Saints are all-out blitz, whether that's true or not, as you said, whether they're using that for bargaining chip for Alvin Kamara or not, whatever. But this all-out blitz, the Titans have apparently been in on Jadeveon Clowney, talked to him all along, been interested in him all along. And the Seahawks have left that door open. But is there the potential there for another team to come out of nowhere and swoop in and decide that Jadeveon Clowney is the guy that's going to make a difference for us? I don't see one off the top of my head, but do you think there's another team that could swoop in there and end up with Jadeveon Clowney?
After what the Patriots did with Cam Newton, I have been keeping an eye on them when it comes to any of these free agents who are still out there, whether it's Earl Thomas, Jadeveon Clowney. I thought they'd make a run at Leonard Fournette. There was a report that they were interested. I still think that was false, and it was aimed at getting the Buccaneers to make the move. And that's the other side of this, too. Will there be, floated by Clowney's camp at some point this weekend, a report that the Patriots are interested in Clowney just to get the deal done with someone else? But yeah, I think you pick any contending team, and they have to ask themselves if they have the cash and cap space.
Yeah.
And look, if they don't have the cap space, they can find a way to create some. It's not all that hard to do. It's a cap problem like a math problem. You sit down with a compass and a ruler and a pencil and you figure it out, and most teams can figure it out and make it all fit under the cap. But yeah, and if I'm Clowney, and look how long he's been in the NFL, at some point you want to put yourself in a position to pursue a championship. So, it won't surprise any team. I'm braced at this point for any team that we loosely consider to be a playoff team popping up out of nowhere and getting this deal done. And beyond the playoff teams, I've seen some talk that the Jaguars, with all that money that they have saved by moving on from Yannick Ngakoue and trading him, that maybe the Jaguars would make a run at Jadeveon Clowney, which some people would say, why didn't you just keep Ngakoue? Well, Ngakoue didn't want to be there. That's why he didn't keep him. And look, I've talked to a bunch of different people about it, and the opinions are mixed as to whether or not Clowney is better than Ngakoue. But I think that people would admit that if Clowney is healthy, and if you know he's going to be healthy, you'd much rather have him than Yannick Ngakoue. And that gets back to my original point. If the Vikings are paying $12 million plus giving up a second-round pick plus another pick to get Ngakoue, what does that translate to for a free agent that you don't have to give a draft pick to go sign? And it doesn't affect your compensatory draft pick consideration. I really do feel like he should be able to get more than $15 million, and that's what he's wanted. And if more teams get to the table, that's just going to drive up the possibility he's going to get that number, Charean.
Yeah, and I think he would probably get more to go to Jacksonville, but why would, if you're Jadeveon Clowney, why would you want to go to Jacksonville? I'm just saying, you want to go win a championship, and you're signing a one-year deal anyway, and the place to go is one of the three teams we mentioned, Seattle, Tennessee, or New Orleans. So Jacksonville, to me, just seems a far-fetched reality unless they come in and just offer way more than any other team, and he's going there for the money and the potential to show something that to other teams so he can hit free agency in 2021 and go, hey, all right, now pay me. You didn't pay me last year. Now pay me. You've seen what I can do. But he would have to have that really huge year in Jacksonville to get that money. But I think it's going to be one of those three teams we talked about, and I just, for some reason, really think it's going to be Tennessee. With Vrabel, and they've been in this thing all along. They could have gotten this deal done a long time ago. They didn't, but I still find that somehow, some way, I think Tennessee's going to get this deal done, and we're going to look at Tennessee as the favorite in that division.
I'll go back to something that Chris and I discussed earlier this week in the aftermath of the Ngakoue trade. And, Sunday morning, we wake up to the news that Ngakoue will be traded to the Vikings, and you have a reaction to that. It's like, wow, hey, the Vikings are making their move. And Chris's reaction, if we had changed Yannick Ngakoue to Jadeveon Clowney, would have been, holy crap, the Vikings are making their move. And I think whoever ends up with Clowney, that's the reaction we're going to have. Holy crap, this team is going for it. They're throwing caution to the wind, and they're going for a potential huge upside, acknowledging that there's a downside possibly that comes along with it.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.